Hi, I'm Oliver, and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. Before I jump into this one, I just want to do a quick shout out to a brand new collaborative online record label that has grown out of the friendships made on the Deep Cuts Discord. They are called Bloom Punch. They've just put together their first compilation comprising of their artists Laver, Wolf Arena, Mechanical Museum, and KZL. So I've put the link in the description, check that out and see what you think. So, onto this week's Essential, the first Deep Cuts Essential of 2018. Burial's Untrue, a frosty, stirring record that pretty much serves as the ultimate soundtrack to January, which is the bleakest month of them all. Somehow this album just celebrated its 10th anniversary in November, and I'm still coming to terms with the fact that it's been around for this long. Burial is the moniker of British musician and producer William Emmanuel Bevan, a born and bred South Londoner who grew up on the hypnotic world of garage and jungle music. Burial's identity actually was kept secret for quite a long time. He released his first full-length record in 2006 on Code 9's Hyperdub label, and there was a shroud of mystery surrounding the release because no one was really sure where this music was coming from. There was a couple of suggestions that maybe Norman Cook of Fatboy Slim, it might be a project of his, maybe even RDJ's, Aphex Twin. When he released follow-up Untrue in November 2007 and was subsequently nominated for a Mercury Music Prize, the tabloids got hold of it and got obsessed with trying to uncover the identity of Burial, to the point where he decided to just do it himself on his MySpace page in 2008. I absolutely love what he wrote next to the picture that he posted. It's just another example of an artist who doesn't see themselves having status over anybody else. There's no agenda there. They're doing this for the love. He just put, "I'm a low-key person and I just want to make some tunes." I love that. Oh, and as a side note, he lost out on the Mercury Music Prize to Elbow. Yeah. So Untrue was released on the 5th of November 2007, and it's a wonderfully dark, enigmatic collage of urban Britain. Burial captures the aesthetic of a jarring concrete cityscape drenched in rain, full of life and characters, moments of enlightened beauty, but also moments of almost oppressive darkness. It's difficult to pin down the sound of this album simply due to the diversity of ideas. You have expansive bass, twinkling percussion that comes from all sorts of different samples that you wouldn't expect, time-stretched vocal samples that hauntingly float across the music. Burial's music has been described in the past as dubstep, and whilst some of his earlier work could be considered examples of the dubstep genre, I feel like it's a bit more complex than that. In fact, it's a lot more complex than that. Burial's music transcends that label for a number of reasons. I think the reason that he gets labelled as dubstep a lot of the time is because, one, he's part of the Hyperdub label, which is a very important label in the dubstep scene. He also geographically is situated around those producers. He knows some of those producers, but to call an album like Untrue dubstep is to severely misrepresent it. There are definitely call-outs to the dubstep sound, but equally there are call-outs to UK garage, trip-hop in certain places, and ambient. Now, ambient is really key to this record, and it's part of what makes this album so unique in its atmosphere and its tone. Bevan manages to harness all of these different disparate elements so well to create this landscape that he's going for. And I think this is one of the reasons almost everybody's heard of this album, even if they haven't taken the step to actually listening to the album yet. It's such a unique sound. Nothing else sounds like this. The tone that Bevan creates is like nothing else. And if that's you, haven't listened to the album yet, you better go and bloody listen to it once this video finishes. I won't tell you twice. It has since been described as future garage, a subgenre label shared with people like Jamie XX, James Blake, Subtract. I don't really know how I feel about future garage as a label though. I don't know, sometimes labels just feel reductive. So whilst creating Untrue, Bevan used a digital audio workstation called SourceForge, and this is one of the big things that sets his music apart from other people in this garage scene in the UK, because he's not sequencing and quantizing every single beat on the beat. This means usually you would have all of these tracks laid out, and you would make sure that everything basically magnetized dead onto the tempo that you were setting for your track. And Bevan doesn't do this. He uses the sound waves. He creates his drum tracks using the sound waves and makes them look like a fishbone. That's what he said in previous interviews. And this means that the drum tracks have little inconsistencies in certain moments. There'll be like a rim click that maybe comes in slightly too early. Something will slip up on itself a little bit. And that goes throughout all of the drum tracks that Bevan creates on Untrue. This does something wonderful. For all of the electronic elements, it allows the album to feel human and organic and flawed, and it's what breathes vital life into every single track on this project. And I can't stress how life-affirming and precious these tracks sound. I really can't. But you know, this is what I'm supposed to do on this channel, so I will endeavour to try. The track Archangel properly introduces the record after the atmospheric Untitled opener, and we get this off-kilter drum pattern, that kind of drum pattern that I was talking about previously, the way that Bevan used that Sound Forge application. He uses pitch shift vocals with this fuzz. There's crackles that fizz across the scape intermittently. Right out of the bat, we get a great example of Bevan's labyrinthine digital crate digging skills, the collage of samples and sounds that he finds from all sorts of media, from video games to films to other songs to the internet. And it's something that's kept fans of the genre and fans of his music busy for a very long time, trying to find and confirm all of these little samples that he used. For example, the pitch shifted vocals on this track are from a particularly whiffy Ray J song called One Wish. I'll put the link in the description if you want to hear quite how awful that is. And the almost operatic quiet and string melody that forms the melodic backbone of this track is taken from the opening credits of the Metal Gear Solid Sons of Liberty video game. What a joy it is to hear these two completely disparate pieces of media brought together to create an evocative, beguiling piece of music. The Metal Gear samples continue on into third track Near Dark. If you listen closely, you can hear the cocking of a gun in the percussion, and also the clinking resonance of bullet shells hitting a concrete floor. There's something otherworldly about these vocal samples, the pitch shifting resulting in a vocal presence that feels almost androgynous, sometimes alien. The voices often cry out, they're silenced or spliced, or they're left to croon alongside the bottomless bass and the crackles of the soundscape. On the title track, Bevan samples a lo-fi webcam cover of the Beyoncé song Resentment, and it's buried underneath one of the most disquietingly off-kilter beats on the entire album. And whilst the beats are so important in Untrue, equally as important are the moments where Bevan holds it back and allows the record to breathe. Take a track like Endorphin, for example, which is this wallowing pool of ambient sounds, voices ringing out amongst the rain, footsteps echoing out into the ether, and it's just willing you to jump into this track and sort of lose yourself, which is something I regularly do with this track. And part of what makes it such a resonant moment on the album is that it succeeds the track Ghost Hardware, which has a very incessant groove, incessant percussive beat to it. Bevan knows how and when to use his percussion, and he never sacrifices the mood of his project for the sake of a really good beat. Similarly, on Shell of Light, the track's gloomy atmosphere devolves into this stunning phrase that genuinely feels as if you're stepping out into sunlight. You're leaving that overbearing cityscape for a moment of clarity. The vocal sample is taken from an acoustic pop track by a guy called Ernie Halter, and the actual phrase itself is, "I wasn't sure if we could be friends," and it creates a lyrical poeticism in an album that often feels sorrowful and lonely. Following up with Dog Shelter, Bevan samples one of my favourite albums of all time, Global Communications 7614. He allows this small passage that he takes to clip as it's repeated, and it's covered in what sounds like footsteps again, drenched in reverb. Again, you've got this idea of humans traversing a concrete, dark, rainy cityscape, and I feel like that visual image is really carried so well across the entire record, whether intentional by Bevan or not. That's the feeling I always get as I listen to this album, and I'll be keen to see if that's something that you guys can see, visualize as you listen to Untrue. The two-headed finale of UK and Raver sums up the dualistic power of Untrue. It's an ambient collage first, replete with sadness, fragmented pitch-shifting vocals ringing out into the atmosphere, and it's a track that can feel both enlightening and unrelentingly heavy depending on your mood at the time of listening to it. Raver appears as the simplest track on the record in terms of its construction, but there's something about that more regular percussive rhythm that Bevan uses that grounds the record in its final stretch. It allows the album to bow out in a really satisfying way. It's almost as if the evocative and unfixed structures of this album suddenly become slightly more concrete, allowing the inhabitants of this cityscape that he's created to cling on with slightly more hope than previously. That's the feeling I get from Raver. There's this slight ray of hope, maybe a glimmer of hope. But also, I don't want this album to come across as if it's completely miserable, because miserable isn't what I feel when I listen to this album. Yes, it's dark in places, but it has those moments of clarity, of beauty as well, and I think that dualistic way of approaching this album is what gives it so much power. So don't go into this album thinking, oh, it's just going to be like a depressing listen, because I don't think that's the case in any way at all. But I'm very keen to see what you will feel about this record. I feel like it's one of those records that that is different for different people, and people will have different interpretations of it. So let me know. Burial's Untrue is a deeply emotional record that says more with its samples and its motifs than many albums can say with their constructed lyricism. And for all of those reasons I've just spoken about, that is why it's a Deep Cuts essential. Thanks for watching this week's episode. I will be on the Deep Cuts Discord tomorrow at 10 p.m. hosting a listening party for Burial's Untrue, so I hope you can join us for that one. That should be a lot of fun. I'll be back next week with my review roundup of December and January, because I haven't done December yet, so we'll do a little bumper edition next week. So thanks for watching. See you then.